Hello everyone, this is Darion of GNB. And once again, we're back with another Friday the 13th video. This time starting out with The New Blood. Friday the 13th, The New Blood, released in May of 1988. The story centers around a telekinetic girl named Tina in an attempt to resurrect her dead father, unwillingly resurrecting Jason Voorhees, unleashing him upon the surrounding residents of Camp Crystal Lake. This movie is interesting. This is another one I had minimal recollection of, besides knowing that this is the one where, quote, Jason fights Carrie. Obviously not actually fighting Carrie, but that's basically what I've heard about it up until now. This one was almost a completely blind watch for me, and it's okay. The story is certainly interesting, I will give it that. Going out and getting another kind of supernatural character to face off against Jason was certainly a fun idea, and they certainly made good use of it. Mainly and only in the end, but you get what I mean. The vibe this movie is going for is interesting because you can kind of tell they just wanted to do some cool shit and have fun. A lot like the previous movie, but to me personally, it doesn't match up quite as well. Not to say it's a complete miss, but not enough was done here for me to really get that invested. The base formula of having Jason come back and kill a few folks is almost starting to wear a little thin on me. The last film provided a bunch that helped remedy and spice these things up, so going into this one and having it be a bit more basic in a few aspects just felt a little disappointing. Yeah, Tina with the telekinetic powers was cool and all, but that only really gets fun and entertaining in the final half of the film. Presentation-wise, this movie does a decent job with the horror atmosphere, I feel. I think a bit better than the last one, but that mainly has to do with Jason, obviously. As well as how much they play around with him and the lighting of a few shots and the kills and whatnot. Something of note is that other than Jason being found at the bottom of Crystal Lake, this movie makes no hard attempts to tie into the previous one. But in all honesty, I feel like it kind of works better that way. There's no discernible time frame as to how long it takes place after Part 6, and I'm kinda fine with that. This feels like the point in the series where they started to give less care to an ongoing narrative and continuity, and just wanted to focus on more self-contained stories with Jason. And I think they did a decent job with that here. The tone isn't as goofy or campy as the previous one, and I think that's why it may fall a little flat to me. Like, yeah, you could tell they wanted to have fun and do cool shit, but that playful and somewhat goofy energy of the last film is kinda missed here, at least to me. That doesn't stop it from being a decent watch, but some of the fun is kinda taken away a bit. The characters are okay. Like, they aren't too one note, they have a good mix of personalities that are fun to watch bounce around, but that's kinda it. Nothing beyond that is all that memorable or interesting. Tina as a protagonist is okay. She doesn't have that interesting of a story besides trying to figure out and control her powers, and getting over the death of her father who died because of said powers. Yeah, that's kinda it. There isn't that much to endear you towards her beyond that. To do a quick rundown of the rest of them, the main love interest guy is fine. He honestly just exists. They don't have that great amount of chemistry, but they work fine enough together, I guess. The writer guy was interesting. Keep in mind, when I say interesting, I don't exactly mean anything about him intrigues me. I just mean that he was among the more, shall I say, noteworthy characters. He stood out more from the rest is what I'm trying to say. The two girls that want to fuck the stoner guy exist. The same can also be said for him. And then you have the unnecessarily bitchy one. And that description is about all I could say about her character. Tina's psychiatrist and mother are alright though. The sleazy and sketchy doctor worked fairly well in the movie, and the mother, well, existed. Jason was pretty fucking sick, though. I forgot to bring it up in the last video, but I do like how the Jason look is ever evolving. I really did like the look they gave him in the last one. The sort of tool belt with the gloves is such a unique take on the Jason look, and I can't help but like it. I also love his look here. Him being all rotted and decayed with bits of spine and ribcage showing, looking more and more decomposed, it's actually cool as hell. Yeah, the characters and character writing for the film is painfully bland, but I think the performances, well, don't necessarily make up for it, but there is some bits of life thrown into these characters, I guess. Yeah, I won't lie, the performances in this movie are god-awful. When I first watched the movie, I was compelled to call it the worst of the series based on the shoddy performances alone. Everything and everyone is so played up to where it feels like so many scenes are parodied of stuff you'd see in slasher movies. But they're actually like this. Like, they're actually this over the top in this movie, and it really doesn't work for me. As I said, the performances do bring at least some life to these basic characters. The actors who portrayed Tina, Dr. Cruz, the mom, and the love interest guy, who I'm remembering is named Nick, did a decent job. I feel like a lot of the overacting comes from Tina and Dr. Cruz's actors. It's just played up so much to where I can never really get into it.
You're more interested in this telekinetic stuff than you are in me.
That is not true, Tina. The only reason that I'm here is to help you overcome the guilt that you have about your father's death. That's all.
That's bullshit!
Your guilt over your father's death it's a powerful thing.
But it wasn't my father.
And your mind is manufacturing these hallucinations because...
It wasn't a hallucination.
Yes, it was.
No!
The writer guy, who I didn't recognize at first, but is Jeff fucking Bennett, did a decent enough job as the guy. Everyone else was not so good. The performances as a whole were a bit much. So much of the cast are hammed up to hell, and not in a fun way. The kills in this movie are unfortunately watered down to shit. I think this is the most notable instance of this happening in the series thus far. Like, yeah, and stuff like Part 5, you can tell the kills and gore effects were on the lower end in terms of quality, but at least with those, you could tell at least some of it was intentionally cheap. Here, you can tell that these are meant to be more gory and intense, but get cut and edited down. I don't know what it is with these last few films that have the kills be painfully watered down. Overall, Friday the New Blood was not that good. It's not a terrible film, I don't think, but it has a lot of faults. The characters and especially performances really aren't that good. Having another supernatural character face off against Jason was a fun idea, but wasn't really all that utilized until the end. The kills were significantly watered down, which kind of takes a bit of the fun out of a slasher film. The practical effects overall were pretty good. The effects on Jason look phenomenal, the way they showcased Tina's powers looked decent enough, and the house explosion was sick as hell. You know, earlier I said it may not be that bad, but the more I sit and write and record this video, the more I think it might be that bad. I feel like this is one of those movies that you'll enjoy depending on what mood you're in, because when I first turned it on, I was already not vibing with it, but it got slightly better the more I went on. But when it came to writing this part of the script, I was honestly struggling to find reasons as to why I grew favorably towards it while I was watching. As it stands now, The New Blood just isn't that good. Now on to Jason Takes Manhattan. Jason Takes Manhattan released in July of 1989. The story centers around Jason once again resurrecting and taking refuge on a ship housing a college group on its way to New York City. And Jason, one by one, slaughters them all. This one I remember solely for being one of the first times I'd been exposed to clickbaiting, because this motherfucker doesn't set foot in Manhattan till about a third of the way into the movie. This movie is not very good. I was apprehensive to call The New Blood a completely bad movie, but this one, yeah, kinda garbaggio. The story does try to spice things up once again, this time having Jason kill on a ship instead of woods or campgrounds. While that may sound basic as shit, I feel like the setting was a neat little switch up for the series. The setting on the Lazarus ship provided a decent amount of good-looking visuals. Some pretty good set pieces and whatnot. Jason on a ship works a lot better than you would expect. The atmosphere really took effect here because of how claustrophobic it felt. But unfortunately, I don't think it was used as well as it could have been. If the movie fully committed to taking place on the ship, I feel like it would have been significantly better. Because New York wasn't even utilized that well either. I will say, I like how the movie doesn't do what dozens of other New York-centric movies do, which is making it nothing but a big tourist attraction with nothing but wonders as far as the eye can see. No, they make New York a complete shithole in this movie, with casual buckets of mucky green sludge, having dozens of people not give a single fuck about anything going on, and for some reason having the sewers run with toxic waste every night, just because. I don't know, I just think it's a fun distinction from the usual portrayals of the city. But other than the setting, the overall narrative doesn't really bring that much to the table. You can tell with this movie they aim to have a sense of finality to it, mainly with trying to bring back and tie in young Jason into the plot, but it just doesn't work. For some reason, throughout the film, you'll have several scenes where we center on Jason as a kid. It doesn't add anything to the story or the main character, which I'll get into in just a bit, and it just felt like a really awkward direction for the story to go. The tone is also pretty straightforward horror. There's no attempts at an overtly humorous or campy tone like some of the recent films, which is fine enough. I think the horror atmosphere was handled pretty well, but not well enough to really say any of it stood out that much. This kind of traces back to the setting of the boat not being used as well as it could have been. Imagine an Alien-style movie with Jason on the hunt and taking everyone out. Now that is technically what happens for a duration of this film, but it really would have benefited from highlighting the trapped in and enclosed feeling a setting like this could provide. The presentation isn't much to speak of either, honestly. The movie is shot decently enough, especially when we get to New York, but as I said, nothing really stands out that much. I'm gonna be honest, this might be the most boring cast of characters in the series, and that's saying something, because a vast majority of the characters in this franchise are dull and forgettable as shit. The main character was boring as all living fuck. They tried to pull a part 3 where her story is intertwined with Jason in some way, but it's honestly the most lame and underwhelming backstory you could give a character in this series. As a kid, What's-Her-Face, no, I'm not going to bother to remember her name, was thrown into the lake by her shithead of an uncle in an attempt to teach her how to swim. While she's in the lake, she gets pulled under by a young Jason, and since then, she's never been able to swim due to her fear of the water. She also has weird psychic visions of young Jason, just because. She doesn't really have that endearing of a personality or anything. She really just exists. Same goes with What's-His-Face, the love interest guy. Yeah, he kinda sucks. They try to give him a story about his dad, I guess maybe pushing him a bit too hard or something like that, but it doesn't really come into play in any interesting way, so it's whatever, I guess. This might be the worst pairing in the series because both of these characters are boring as hell and don't even have that good amount of chemistry. I love how the dog literally just pops in and out of the movie at random points. Like, he literally just materializes out of thin air whenever he wants. The uncle is honestly a character you love to hate. He's such a jackass that he provided the most amount of hilarity among the cast members for me. Everyone else, Normally I do a rundown of the rest of the cast, but I'm sorry y'all, I just can't be bothered. These guys don't really offer anything of worth to the film. Hell, I think even the filmmakers agreed because there are several moments in the movie where they just straight up forget that characters exist. The teacher that brought What's-Her-Face to the ship? Yeah, just dies unseen in a car explosion. These random attendees on the ship? Yeah, just drowned off screen, I guess. Jason in this movie was cool, I guess, but that's not really saying much. Gotta say, the look of Jason is a bit of a downgrade for this film. The decayed and rotten look was so fun that going from that to this was just a bit of a letdown. Something I want to briefly talk about is what the fuck is Jason's deal in this movie? By the end of the movie, when Jason is following the final two, I couldn't help but ask myself, why the fuck does Jason care about these two so much? They didn't do anything to provoke him this much to where he literally ignores everyone else he comes across just to get these two. The reason I bring this up is because a long-established characteristic of Jason is that he's almost akin to an animal. You go into his territory, he will fuck you up. So having him be this hell-bent on coming after and chasing these guys down is just so weird. And actually, I just realized this. The entire crux of this plot revolves around Jason for some reason venturing out of Crystal Lake, going out of his way to make it onto the ship just to kill a few randos who, like I said, are not anywhere near Crystal Lake. He doesn't even try to make it back to the damn place. He just guns it for this random group of characters. Also, the way he made it to the ship as well doesn't make any sense. He kills a couple on a boat in the middle of a lake, and Jason, for some reason, never getting off, it sails out to sea where it bumps into the Lazarus ship. Which is just... how? The cast as well don't help in regards of having nothing to offer either. The performances are very bland and one note. In The New Blood, while some of the overacting was a bit much for me, at least the performances brought some life into the film. Here, everyone is just so... boring. The same kind of goes for the kills, honestly. The kills are the thing people come to these movies for, so having back-to-back movies with very cheap and lackluster kills is pretty fucking lame. I will say, this movie really has only one notable kill, and it was where Jason punches the dude's head off. That's honestly among my favorites of the franchise because it's just one of those things that's so absurdly stupid and cool. Everything else was just... The guitar one was shot pretty well, but a majority of them are cutaway kills or don't really linger and allow that much visibility of the gore, which is just lame as hell. The practical effects are fine, I guess. Nothing in here looks too terrible except the effects on the young Jason, which are too wildly inconsistent. And Jason's exposed face. Good God, he looks like dog shit. Major downgrade from The New Blood. Overall, Jason Takes Manhattan blows hard. I'm sorry if this segment runs a little short, but there's not much I can really say. The story is bland, the characters are boring as shit, the actors really didn't bring much to the table either. The setting was a nice little switch up, but wasn't utilized to the best of its ability. The same goes for the title location of the film, which was greatly underutilized. The kills were very watered down for the most part and lacking creativity. The same can be said for the practical effects as well. The entire plot hinges on Jason being extremely out of character, and the ending is also complete dog shit. When the sewers of New York go through their routinely toxic waste flood, for some fucking reason, Jason gets caught in it and is turned back into a child. What the shit? Yeah, Jason Takes Manhattan blows dick. Easily the worst of the franchise, bar none. Now on to The Final Friday. Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, released in August of 1993, which is a first, as up to this point, all the Friday movies have dropped well within a year of each other. I'm pretty sure this had to do with Paramount handing the film rights over to New Line Cinema, but I ain't 100% sure on that. Hopefully the extra time allowed for them to cook up something good this time around. The film centers around Jason Voorhees getting blown the fuck up and in need of a new body. He hops from person to person, possessing them in hopes to possess either his sister or his niece, as only a Voorhees body can sustain him. If any of what I just said sounded like a load of dumb bullshit, that's because it is. This movie, while more entertaining than the last one, is still a big pile of shit. This movie makes big leaps with the lore of the series and Jason as a character. And normally I'm all for trying new things and spicing things up, but this ain't it. I know this franchise has thrown continuity aside almost from the very beginning, but the direction they took with this film just feels like a bit too much of a reach for me. This movie aims to put Jason into an even more supernatural narrative than he already was. They try to establish that Jason, the one we see, is merely a shell for his true form, and that the only way for him to truly die is for someone of Voorhees' blood to kill him. Considering that Pamela's fucking dead and they never established that Jason had any siblings, they decided to make shit up. So Jason has a sister. Apparently. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. Jason being this weird demon creature is, in my opinion, way too big of a leap to make from a very clear Frankenstein's monster pastiche. Him going around and possessing people and whatnot just doesn't do anything for me. It's dumb and lame. Them going in and adding the fact that Jason had a supposed sister this entire time is also just... Huh? Why? Why did this need to be a thing? Nothing interesting is even done with it, as she dies long before we figure this out. And it really just feels like a cheap and dumb decision made for the sake of it. The writing for this movie is god-awful. Now, these movies have never been greatly written or anything like that, but it's the fact that this movie actually goes and tries to have some bigger plot than any of the previous entries, and it fails at almost every turn. The movie tries to throw in a ton of new bullshit, completely disregarding everything that came before, all without dedicating enough time to this new established lore. Apparently, Pamela or some member of the Voorhees family studied the dark arts, as shown by the fucking Necronomicon in the Voorhees household. Actually, now that I think about it, that might explain how Jason came back after being drowned, and how he was damn near unkillable before becoming an even more unkillable zombie with teleportation powers. The way the characters are written is so odd because you never get a clear history for what the relationships with these guys are like prior to this movie's events. The story also has so many holes as it feels like they were actively trying to come up with more rules for Jason's possession bullshit as it went along. Early on in the film, Jason kills his sister, but in the end, they establish that the body doesn't have to be alive for him to possess it. So that begs the question as to why he didn't possess her then and there. I get it, the movie has to movie, but come on, y'all. I'll explain why I went in on that specifically in just a bit, but the pacing of this film is also a tad weird. This is among the reasons as to why the new lore they try to set up didn't land that well, because the film's really moving a mile a minute and doesn't leave that much breathing room. If there's a positive I will give the movie, and it's something that a few of the past films did that I don't think I mentioned at all, it's so cool how much Jason has become a massive problem for the world, where almost everyone has heard of this Crystal Lake killer, to the point where you have bounty hunters and military ops plotting to take him down. That opening was honestly cool as shit, and was a sick as fuck introduction to the film. I'll say, presentation-wise, this is a significant improvement from the previous installments. The scare and creep factor isn't really present here, and honestly, I don't really think it would have made that much of an improvement anyway. I'm not sure what the budget was for this movie, but I'd say it was used pretty effectively. And I'll go more into this later, but all the practical and some of the visual effects hold up pretty nicely. The characters are surprisingly more interesting this time around. Well, if I'm being honest, only about 2 or 3 of them are really that enjoyable. The main guy, whose name I forget, was a pretty serviceable protagonist. His story over the course of the film was a rather intriguing one, trying his best to mend his relationship with his ex-girlfriend, I guess, Jessica, as well as, stop Jason, but that's not necessarily his overall goal throughout the film. As I mentioned before, the way they handle the relationships with these characters is so odd, because you just get introduced to these guys in the middle of their story with not much info to understand what they got going on. When we see Steven, yes, I'm just now remembering his name, we see he has some connection to this woman, Diane, Jason's sister, and her daughter, Jessica. But we don't really understand what the entire dynamic is, as you're just left to piece things together as the film goes on. The baby that Jessica's been shown with throughout the film is actually Steven's baby. She had while, I guess, after they broke up. But the film never tells you this, so my ass was confused as shit when he first runs into the baby. Talking about this is the first time he's really seen her and shit. They never really tell us why they broke up or any of that. Not to mention that Steven has this friendship with this one cop guy that in the film is handled so awkwardly. Because yeah, they're written as if they've had this long-lasting friendship, but at no point did the movie ever properly introduce it to the audience. I'm aware that a lot was cut from this movie, and that as a result makes it feel like a giant mess when it comes to its characters. Anyway, Steven. Yeah, I enjoyed him for the most part. He's one of the more proactive protagonists in the series, probably the most next to Tommy so far, which is pretty cool. Creighton Duke was the biggest highlight of the film for me. This absurd and eccentric bounty hunter and his weird as hell personality and charm brought so much to the film. If there's one thing that pisses me off, however, it's the role he has in the overall film. He's really nothing more than the writer's insert to have him explain the new Jason lore they pulled out of their ass. How does he know that Jason is only a shell and he's really this nasty little demon critter? How does he know that only a Voorhees body can sustain him and only a Voorhees can kill him? They allude to some past history between him and Jason, but like a lot of things in this movie, they don't give enough time to explore that. Jessica, Diane's daughter and Jason's niece, was alright in the film. She didn't really contribute that much throughout the movie until the end where she had to kill Jason. The familial ties this movie went and created feel so undercooked and lame, honestly. This is Jason's apparent niece sending him to hell. You would have thought this wouldn't suck. That said, the introduction of other Voorhees family members is a dumb and lame idea to begin with, honestly. Anyway, Jessica was okay. She exists. I'm sorry I gotta bring something up, and it has nothing to do with my following point, but I just gotta. In the scene where Jason is getting pulled into hell and one of the arms grabs Steven, why the hell did it take Jessica so long to help the motherfucker? Like, I don't know if I can show the full clip, but it looked like she was real-time contemplating on helping this nigga. To do a quick rundown of the other characters, I really did like the folks that were in the diner. The mom was a hard-ass cheapskate, the son was chill, and the dad was a goof. These guys' presence, while minor, was a pretty fun one. Same goes for Vicky, who had an unnecessarily badass showdown with Jason. The sleazy reporter guy was okay. Steve's cop friend was also okay. The characters all around this time weren't really that bad. Jason. Jason. You see, the reason I brought up that bit with why didn't Jason possess Diane's body early on when he killed her was not only because it was a legitimate hole in the film's writing, but I also brought it up because it would have actually allowed us to have proper Jason in the movie more. Yeah, Jason as we know him isn't in the movie, except for the beginning and end. I know the point was the whole Jason can swap and possess bodies, but I'm sorry, that idea fucking sucks. The only benefit it gave us was having different people adopt and play the role of Jason, which I'll say was handled in a pretty good way. But obviously, in a Jason movie, I expect to see proper Jason. Especially as the look he was given was pretty cool, minus the weird lumpy head and the mask being fused to his face. The performances in this movie were honestly pretty damn good. The folks that play Steve, Jess, and especially Duke did a phenomenal job. Everyone around here just did a pretty good job. Nobody really hams it up or are too flat delivery-wise. They all played it like it was a movie they were proud to be in. I don't know why they would be, but regardless, the effort is undoubtedly appreciated. The kill and gore effects were top fucking notch this movie. I watched this movie's theatrical release, even though I probably should have found a way to see the unrated version, as that's where we get buckets of more blood and gore. But I will say, the theatrical version still had a decent amount of gore. All the kills are pretty intense, and the way Jason mutilates these folks still looks alright. I'm positive I would have had more to say had I watched the unrated version for this rewatch, but as a whole, it worked well enough. Jason snapping that dude's wrist, knocking that lady's jaw into her face, the fucking dude melting after Jason left his body. Holy fucking shit, man, this is gnarly. Semi-unrelated, but there was this shot in the movie where the weird lizard slug Jason, that's apparently his true form, shoots up the dead Diane's vag in order to possess her. And I don't know why, but when I saw this movie as a kid, that specific shot disturbed the fuck out of me. The shot isn't in the theatrical version, as I found out on this rewatch, and is most likely a part of the unrated version. Why am I bringing this up? I don't know, it's my video, who cares? Overall, Jason Goes to Hell is a giant fucking mess. It aims to bring in new and exciting lore that completely disregards everything that came before it. Jason going full-on demon possession mode is just a bit too far out there for me to find interesting. The new stuff they try to establish is never organically woven into the narrative in a way that makes sense. The pacing for the movie as well isn't that great, as it feels like the movie is moving at a constant pace. The characters, while enjoyable and fun for the most part, their relationships and dynamics amongst one another was so poorly handled and executed as it'll be lost for a good chunk of the runtime. The gore and kill effects, however, were pretty fun despite the limitations of the theatrical version, and the practical effects used were pretty damn good as well. Overall, Jason Goes to Hell is just a big fucking mess, but a semi-enjoyable one, especially compared to Jason Takes Manhattan. So, with all that said, if you agree or disagree with anything I've said in this video, let me know right down there in the comments below. Also, be sure to like and subscribe. This is Darian of GNB Productions, and take care.